guys, welcome back to another episode. And yeah, I know I left you on a bit of a cliffhanger, but here we are. I've got the head pulled off, and look at all that oil on number 3. I already wiped these ones off, and you know, clearly the coating looks exactly the same. So I figured if that coating was going to bugger off, it would have done it, you know, right on startup, like real quick afterwards. So the fact it's still here and looks just as it did when I put them in gives me hope that I didn't put it on wrong and it's gonna actually stick around and stay on there for a while. Now, that is, it's coming out of the head, right? We can clearly see everything in the bottom end looks absolutely mint. And it is in the top end and it's leaking down from the intake guides for some reason. I'm not sure why. So I'm going to haul that apart. But in the meantime, I got another head all prepared and ready to drop on. So we're going to put this thing back together as fast as possible and see if it doesn't run half decent. Alright guys, so brief little update. As you can see, that is now back in the air and that is dragged out. No, we're not going backwards in time. I had to yard that out, and so it's been a harrowing 3 weeks or so since the last scene, trying to figure out what was going wrong in there. So first I swapped the head because I thought it was valve stem seals leaking. So I swapped the head, new valve stem seals and everything, and it did it again. And I thought maybe I got bad stem seals or maybe I accidentally damaged them when I installed them. So I pulled the head and went through it again with better seals. I went with some Holley ones the second time, and I know for certain I didn't damage them. They're perfect. So it did it again and started burning a lot of oil real quick, right out the gate. So the only thing it can be is bores. The bores are too big. So I went back into my document sheet of what all my clearances were, and yeah, I thought it would be okay running 3.5 thou cylinder to wall, cylinder to piston clearance, but it must not be. And the reason I was that big and thought it would be okay is that when I was looking up what to do for nitrous, the nitrous had said it wants about an extra thou of clearance on your piston. So if the piston wants a minimum 1.5, and then I figured the nitrous wants another thou on top of that, that'd be 2.5. So I kind of figured 3.5 might be okay, be a little bit of safety, just in case, something expanded. But clearly 3.5 thou clearance is too much. That's got to be the problem. I am certain it's not top end after having pulled it apart 3 times already and put it back together. So I went and I found a block where the bores are still within standard spec, and the clearances will be back down to 1.5 thou to 2 thou or so, and we'll try that and hope for the best. So I'm gonna yard this thing apart and then take everything that's in this engine and on this engine, because it's still brand new, it's run for less than 15 minutes maybe, and I'm just gonna put that into the other block, and then we're gonna put that back in the car and hope for the best. So this has not been going well, but hopefully we get her figured out and get out and have some fun with it. Alright, so after a long week of thrashing real hard after work every day, I've got the block swapped and it's all back in the car now. We've tightened up the clearances on the piston to cylinder bore clearance by, about 1.5 thou. They were at 3.5. They're now at 2 maximum. Some of them are as perfect at like 1.5, which is exactly what these pistons want as a minimum. So I just gotta make all the connections to connect it back into the car and build oil pressure and fire it up. And if it still doesn't work after that, the next thing we'll be seeing is how to set a car on fire. Okay, so I decided not to set it on fire, but clearly I'm having the same problem again. Look at the amount of oil in number 2. Like, it's just, I don't know what's going on here, guys. This is really confusing me. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start ticking off things that, what is the same in every situation I've had so far. And the block is no longer a constant, and I guess maybe the 3.5 thou clearance I had on the original bores wasn't that bad, because these ones are 2, 1.5, 1.5, and 1.7 thou. So this is perfectly in tolerance. There is no way this is coming up past the rings. There's no way. So I'm confident in the bores this time. I'm confident in the pistons. Maybe the rings got damaged, but I can't see that much oil coming up past the rings. That just baffles me. So here's the head. And you can just see the amount of oil running out of those intake valves on number 2. And the rest of that oil is coming from the drains there, but I tipped this thing up and it just poured out of there. So it's got to be the head. And the head is a fairly constant issue in this situation too. So the only 2 heads I've ran, both were ported intakes. And maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe some wall got real thin between some oil and where it's been hit with a die grinder, and that's sucking oil through the casting somehow. Or maybe these castings are cracked and I just don't know it because it's in an area I can't find that crack or something. I don't know. So I am going to do up another head. In fact, the original head that came off this car, it's not going to be ported with a ported intake and a ported head. It's just going to be straight factory, untouched, nothing done to it, not modified at all. I'm still going to run the intake cam mod, and I'm still going to shim my springs because I can't see how either of those things would cause an oil burning issue. I trust my valve stem seals. I've changed them 3 times now and ended up with the same result. I don't think it's valve stem seals. So I think it's the head itself, and that's where I'm going to start. And if that still doesn't work, then I will re-ring and re-hone these cylinders in the car and put new rings in. And if that doesn't work, I'm at a complete loss. I have no idea what's going on here. None at all. And if that's the case, I might just bore one of my other blocks 20 over so I know it's good, and get a set of 20 over pistons and rings and try that, because this is getting ridiculous. I've now had the head off of this car 4 times, and I've had the engine out once. I've swapped the block, I've swapped the heads, I've done a ton of things, and I just cannot figure this out. I've never ever had this issue before. I've built a ton of these engines in my time on Earth here, and never ever have I had this problem. So, I don't know. I have no idea what it could be. I am throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping something sticks at this point, guys. Luckily, the parts cannon is already in my basement, so it's not like I gotta spend a bunch of money loading the damn parts cannon up and firing things at it. But right now, I'm grasping for straws, guys. I have no idea what's causing it, and that is a lot of oil. Okay, so it's a couple of weeks later, and you can clearly see that an engine is still not in this goddamn car. Now, so I did change the head, and that helped about 70%. And I was still getting oil, but not nearly as much. So I looked and bore scoped everything, and there's still a little bit of oil on the pistons. And so I attributed that to probably coming up past the rings, and maybe the rings were no good because of all this screwing around I've been doing. So, but I did some things and I figured some stuff out. So let's head into the basement and I'll show you what I did. Okay, so I'm going to start with the blocks. Now, this one down here is the first one I was using. And it was, you know, a little oversized. I think for a naturally aspirated motor, you want really no more than like 2.5 thou piston clearance. And this one was up at around 3.5. But you see how it's kind of nice and shiny here, but then kind of gets darker in there, even though you can still see a decent crosshatch with the hone. Now, maybe my little ball hone thing is getting wore out, because I've used it quite a bit. But there's that, and that's no good. It didn't really look like that before, but once the piston went up and down a few times and the rings couldn't bite into it, then there was nothing stopping it from slightly sharpening the rings and then the rings not going anywhere. And so I thought this one was leaking because out of size. So I went and I used this block, right? And I honed it, and I was very mindful to keep the size on so that I didn't lose size, but it actually has the same issue. Now, these two blocks came with that turbo car I bought, so, you know, they looked like they were rusty inside, but then I wiped them out and realized they had greased them, and then that was just the grease had gotten dirty and looked like rust, and I'd wiped them out, and they looked fairly clean with a couple of spots of very mild surface rust that I then tried to hone. Well, once the rings went up and down on it and cut into it a bit, it exposed that behind it too, and the rings would never seal against that. So that's why I was getting a little bit of oil even after changing the heads. Now, I'm going to go show you, well, I didn't find anything in the heads. They're kind of weird. I just have theories about them as to why I was getting so much oil. Because I never got puddles of oil after changing to the head that I trust, which is a nice stock head, the original head off that green car. It drove me home from Edmonton with that, so I know that head was good and I trusted it. And so I'm going to keep that, and this is why the bores were slightly leaking even afterwards. So I was actually fighting two problems. The oil was coming from both below and above. I don't 100% understand the above yet, but those things were both on boosted motors then blown up, so who knows, something might have got damaged up in the head that now causes it. Because that last time I put that head on, or one of those other heads, it was almost like the oil pump pumped that giant puddle of oil from the last scene into that one cylinder. So I'll go explain the head thing in a minute here. Alright, so this is one of the heads. This is the head that, if you've watched the video when I bought that turbo car, it came with a bunch of parts. This is the head that was not on the car. This is the one that they had already had built. It'd been through a machine shop, it'd been surfaced. The installed heights on the valves were like perfectly in tolerance. The seats looked new. It looked like this had gone through a lot of work, like they were prepping to use it next. It's also the one that they had ported off of it. And this is the second one I tried using. And I'm actually starting to think that they didn't go and get this head and prep it for a second use. I'm guessing it was the original head and the first motor that they more than likely blew up, and it got damaged because it wasn't stem seals or anything on it. The first head I started using was this one, and this is the one that I pulled off of the turbo car, so it had also been under boost and on a blown up motor. So they had said that it just needed stem seals, but then I put it on and it started smoking real bad, and it was not the stem seals. Well, actually I haven't pulled this one apart, but I don't think it was the stem seals. So I think there's something up with these two heads from, you know, just the life they've lived that I don't know. I'll have to look further into them and see what possibly could have happened to them. But they were both, you know, under boost and probably being raced. So I don't know what the deal with them is. But the head I'm using, if we head over here, is this one. I explained it already. It's basically fully stock. It's the one that came on that green car already. Other than twin cam mod, or the intake cam mod is still being done, and I've still got my valve spring shimmed 30 thou. It's all fine. When I did fire it up, it runs really, really smooth. It's really happy. So no worries there. So to solve the block problem, I sleeved a block. Now, for me, that was the cheapest option. I was able to do this for about $170 all in for me. I'll explain that in a minute. The other option was spending about $400 and honing over to 20 over pistons and rings, and that was going to cost me about $400. So the sleeves themselves are about $42, $43 each per hole. Now, the reason I only had to pay for parts is because I actually work at my machine shop now. So I went in as a customer and walked out with a job one day. They found out I was a machinist, and I've been one for 15 years. So, and I just hadn't gotten into this side of it, but a machine's a machine, and when you're trained to cut metal, you know how to operate almost all of them, if not figure it out, right? So now at this point now, there's not a machine in the shop I haven't ran successfully. So I was able to do all this in my spare time. Now, it was incredibly time consuming. I spent 4 hours after work on Thursday and 5 hours after work on Friday to do this job. It's fairly time consuming, and my boss did inform me that a job like this, we charge $350 to install a sleeve per cylinder. So if I were a paying customer, and didn't work there and have the benefit of doing that, this would actually be a very not cost-effective option to sleeve the block, because it would have been about $1,600 plus tax. And in that case, 20 thou over pistons is probably the best way to go if you've got bad bores, because sleeving a block as a not being able to do it yourself and have the equipment on hand to do it is next to impossible. This would have been incredibly expensive, and I probably wouldn't have done it. I would have just bought pistons, but I didn't want to have to spray another set of pistons with the coating to do all that. I wanted to use those, and this actually ended up being right for me. But now I've done it, and it looks really, really good. So everything is perfectly on size because I was in control of all of it, and we're brand new. I actually had to hone about 30 thou out of these cylinders after they were slid in. And they're the 1/8 inch sleeved cylinders, so they're actually thicker than the stock ones. So I actually ended up boring into the aluminum. And it's not just a sleeve within the factory sleeve. It is a brand new sleeve, and I had to bore about 60 thou of aluminum. The original aluminum bore is around 3.417, and the outer of these sleeves is around 480, 3.480. So I did have to bore quite a bit into the aluminum, and then I gave them a good 3 thou press fit, and they are green Loctited in, for those that are curious. I also left the shoulder that is at the bottom, so even there, mechanically, they can't really slide down, right? But it is fairly tricky work, I will say. And I now understand why it is $350 a hole to do this job. It is very time extensive. The boring bars that are used in automotive aren't like the big ones in machining where you can take gigantic cuts where it's not like I could rough it out in one cut per hole and then just do a light finishing cut to hit my size. That boring bar, I was taking 50 thou on diameter per cut. So it was 4 or 5 cuts per hole, and then a bunch of finishing cuts because our boring bar isn't exactly the greatest. So it took a bit of skill and effort to hit these sizes for the sleeves properly with that boring bar. So that added a little bit of time too. It was kind of challenging using some of the equipment. It's not 100% the greatest equipment out there, but it gets the job done, and I was able to do this successfully. And then the hone, fixed any out around from the sleeves being any distortion from installing the sleeves. So, but yep, it's a lot of work, and it was mildly pretty stressful, but now it's done. I'm gonna just make some quick checks on this block to make sure the piston height is right and the bearing clearances are right, because new block, I got to check that and everything. I've already checked the bores from when I was machining. Put the plugs in and get everything all ready to go, and then I can slap it together and get it in the car, and I think this one should work. And yeah, it was totally all my fault. I was trying to get away with things. I didn't know whether or not they were 100% going to work. I was just trying to get away with being cheap and trying to do it as cheap as possible and not have to do a lot of work to do it right. And it basically cost me 6 weeks, and I still had to do everything to do it right anyway. So live and learn. I know what I can and can't get away with now, and I'll be a little more careful when I am honing blocks and know what kind of surface finish I can and cannot get away with. So kind of learned that one the hard way, but hey, I got a new skill out of this and I enjoy it, and yeah, no big deal. So it's been a couple of busy weeks here since the last scene there, and I got the engine in the car. Oh, that's not the car, but that should be a good sign that it went well. So rearranged the yard a bit, but there it is. It's not burning any oil anymore. It's running, it's driving, it sounds pretty good. It's got about 15K on it. I've been kind of lightly driving it. It is legal to drive on the road now. It goes for its final safety inspection in a few days here, and then hopefully it's legal to register and insure. Where I live, you only need to get that once if the vehicle has never been registered in the province before, or it hasn't been registered in the last 5 years. You'll need one. So, but yep, there it is. it's good. It hasn't given me any problems yet, anyway. But start it up. It's already been for new exhaust. So start it here. So starts real nice, idles nice. No blue smoke, which is really nice. Sounds okay. The muffler that I have on here is an old Cherry Bomb that I bought years ago and never used. I don't know if I like the way it sounds, but it sounds. So we're all good under here, no leaks. All the coolants all the fluids are staying in their respective places. Oil stays where oil goes, coolant stays where coolant goes. They are not mixing with each other. It runs very well. So I think we're good now. So that gives me confidence, because I will be sleeving another block to do the turbo motor that I'll build over the winter. And it doesn't look like I'll have much time in this year to actually really wreck this motor, so I'll have a spare ready to go. But we'll put a bit of a rev on her and see. Kind of sounds okay, I think. Yeah, so she's running good, and we'll just get the safety all done up. The next video we will do the suspension, and we'll get the gauges in, and we'll put the nitrous in, and we will put, hopefully the wheels and tires are here by then. I've got them ordered right now. I don't know if they'll be here by then, but hopefully they will be. And then we're ready to roll, and maybe there's an event or something we can get out to this year and kind of shake it down. But as of right now, the car is running flawlessly great. Absolutely really love it. That clutch it's a little bit aggressive, but not too aggressive, and it is easy to drive on the street. It's very grabby and very grippy, but not unmanageable, and it's not a complete on-off switch. It's close, but not quite. So it's really awesome. And the lightweight flywheel paired with the twin cam mod. Sorry to interrupt the video, but I was just editing it and I noticed that I screwed up. So I just said twin cam mod. What I meant to say was intake cam mod. Now back to the regularly scheduled video. Basically makes it feel almost stock in the lower RPMs. I haven't really pushed it above into even letting the cams open up yet. I have not taken this thing above 3,500 RPM on the street. I've revved it with no load on it up to about 4 grand, but I haven't done anything over 3,500 on the street under load yet. So I don't know what it feels like when the cams open up, but it feels just like my other cars. So the lightweight flywheel obviously complements the lack of horsepower from moving it with the cam mod. So we might be 5 horsepower less in the bottom, but that lightweight flywheel seems to make up for it really nicely. But so until the next video, guys, we're all running good, and we'll see you next time.